If everyone around you is setting goals for January and you feel nothing but quiet resistance, your brain isn't being lazy, it's protecting something deeper. People will call you unmotivated. They'll say you lack discipline, that you're settling, that you're afraid of change. But the truth is far more psychologically complex than that. Because the people who don't make New Year resolutions aren't avoiding growth. They're avoiding the specific kind of pressure that's already failed them before. Your nervous system remembers every time you set a goal and couldn't meet it, every time you promised yourself something would be different and it wasn't, every time you tried to become someone else's version of better and felt yourself shrink in the process. That's not failure, that's pattern recognition. And your brain, in its quiet wisdom, has decided that the annual performance of self-improvement isn't worth the cortisol spike that comes with it. There's research around something called goal-related anxiety. It shows that for certain people, especially those with histories of perfectionism or inconsistent achievement, the act of setting a formal goal triggers the same stress response as the potential failure itself. Your body doesn't wait to see if you'll succeed. It remembers that goals have historically come with shame, comparison, and the exhausting gap between who you are and who you're supposed to be. So it opts out, not because it doesn't want progress, but because it knows the cost of performing progress. Most people don't realize that resolutions are inherently tied to external validation. You're not just deciding to exercise more, you're entering an unspoken contract with a cultural narrative that says January 1st is magic, that change requires announcement, that you owe the world proof of your growth. And if you've spent years sensing that your worth is conditional, that love and acceptance come with terms and conditions, then that framework feels suffocating. Because you've already learned that trying to meet external standards doesn't make you feel whole. It makes you feel watched. This often traces back to childhood environments, where effort was scrutinized more than existence, where being good wasn't enough unless you were also improving, where mistakes weren't just mistakes, they were evidence that you weren't trying hard enough. So you learned early that goals aren't neutral, they're opportunities to be measured. And the brain, brilliant and adaptive, eventually says, if I don't set the goal, I can't fail it. If I don't announce the change, no one can watch me fall short. But here's what most people miss. Not making resolutions doesn't mean you're stagnant. It means you've internalized a different relationship with growth. You've learned that real change doesn't happen on a calendar. It happens quietly, in small decisions that don't require an audience. You've realized that you don't need to perform transformation to experience it, and that the pressure to constantly be better often prevents you from noticing that you're already different than you were 6 months ago. You're not avoiding goals because you're scared of success. You're avoiding the theater of it, the Instagram post, the accountability partner, the public declaration that turns your private process into something others get to comment on. Because you've learned that when growth becomes visible, it becomes vulnerable. And vulnerability, for you, has too often been met with judgment instead of support. There's also a neurological component here that people overlook. Dopamine, the brain's motivation chemical, doesn't spike the same way for everyone. If you grew up in an environment where effort didn't reliably lead to reward, where trying hard didn't guarantee you'd be seen or celebrated, your dopamine pathways learned not to get too excited about future outcomes. You developed what psychologists call learned helplessness, not in a dramatic way, but in a subtle one. Your brain stopped betting on the future because the past taught it that the future doesn't always pay out. So when January rolls around and everyone else is lighting up at the idea of becoming someone new, your brain stays quiet, not because it doesn't want good things for you, but because it's been trained to expect disappointment. And rather than feel that disappointment again, it chooses neutrality. It chooses the safety of the present moment, where you already know who you are and what you can handle. People who don't make resolutions are often people who've spent years trying to be enough for others. They've done the self-help books, the goal journals, the vision boards, and somewhere along the way they realized that the chase itself was the problem, that constantly reaching for a better version of themselves meant never being allowed to rest in the version they are. So they stopped, not because they gave up, but because they finally understood that peace doesn't come from perpetual striving. It comes from acceptance. And acceptance, real acceptance, doesn't have a start date. This doesn't mean you're not changing. It means you're changing in ways that don't require fanfare. You're letting go of relationships that drain you. You're setting boundaries without announcing them. You're choosing rest over productivity guilt. You're learning to like yourself without needing to fix yourself first. That's growth. It just doesn't look like what society celebrates.
And yes, there's loneliness in this, because when everyone around you is talking about their goals and their progress, and you're sitting there knowing you've opted out of that entire system, it can feel isolating, like you're the only one who sees through it. Like you're missing some gene that makes ambition feel exciting instead of exhausting. But the isolation you feel now isn't new. It's the same isolation you felt when you were trying to meet everyone's expectations and still coming up short. The difference is, now you're choosing the solitude instead of having it chosen for you. You've learned that the loudest growth isn't always the deepest, that the people posting their transformations aren't necessarily more evolved, just more comfortable with exposure. And you've decided, consciously or not, that your relationship with yourself doesn't need an audience, that you're allowed to evolve slowly, privately, without turning your life into content. So if you're not making resolutions this year, you're not broken. You're just done pretending that change happens on command. You're done letting the calendar dictate your worth. You're done performing progress for people who won't be there when the performance ends. And maybe that means you'll grow slower than others, or maybe it means you'll grow deeper. Either way, it's yours, and no one else gets to measure it. If this felt uncomfortably accurate, the next video will probably explain even more.